Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and today we've got something a little bit different for you. We're going to be talking to Chris, the Longarm Quilter from So&So Sisters, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her history of quilting, and then we're going to be setting up a quilt on the machine, and we'll talk about some things that you need to know before you take your quilt to a professional to be quilted. So thank you for allowing us to come and talk to you, Chris.
It's a pleasure.
So how about telling us a little bit about your history in quilting, and when did you get started?
I've been a sewer all my life.
Right.
I've been a patchworker for 25, 30 years. I used to quilt all my quilts on my domestic sewing machine, and I had a very big quilt and I took it to a friend who quilted it for me, and I just loved the professional long arm quilting.
I think most of us know what it's like to quilt a quilt on a home machine. It can be a little bit tricky, and you don't really get that nice professional look, I don't think.
No, I did the simple things like
Yes.
in the ditch or a grid, or what we all do when we start off. And the lady that I took my quilts to she's a lovely lady who bought a handy quilter before they came to Australia, and I was always fascinated with a long arm machine. And
so you went straight from a domestic machine to a long arm. You didn't go like with the what are they called, the Sweet 16?
No, I went straight
to it.
Straight to it.
Now you bought your machine in America, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
The lady that had been quilting my quilts, she bought hers from America before Handy Quilter came to Australia. I emailed the man that she bought hers from, and the information he gave me was just amazing. I learnt so much just through emails and talking to him on the phone. He wasn't pressuring me to buy it, so I went ahead and ordered a machine from him, knowing never touched one in my life. And he said that if I'd like to come to America, he would give me 6 days training.
Wow,
So
that's great service, isn't it?
It was wonderful.
Brilliant.
So we went, my daughter and son-in-law and grandson and I went to America, this little town in Illinois, and
Right.
that was my first experience with a long arm machine.
Right, and you bought the top of the line model, didn't you? You bought a computer.
Yes.
The computer with it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I bought the Pro Stitcher,
Yep.
which is the computerization. I've got an Avanti 18, which means the throat of the machine is 18 inches.
Right.
You can get a 24-inch, or now you can get a 36.
Right, okay.
And I thought this was big enough
Yes.
to have fun on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, that's what you've got it for mainly,
yes,
wasn't it? Was
yeah.
to play.
To play.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes, it's a big toy.
So how long is your machine?
12 foot.
Right, so it's
So-
big enough to take a king size quilt
Yes.
easily.
Yes.
Yeah. That's excellent. Well, I think we might now just go on and set up the machine with a quilt.
I've already started to put the quilt on. I've put the backing on the first roller, and you put the backing face down and pin it onto the roller. Then I put the top on face up and pin that on and roll it up. Now I have to get the backing onto the take-up roller at the back, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm pinning that on now.
So this is obviously the longest part of the process.
Yes, like with anything you do, the preparation is the important part. So we can get the quilt on the machine that's straight, it's square, and you get a much better result, because sometimes our quilts we don't make them square. And
Really?
So how long would it take you to put a quilt to get it ready to be quilted?
a queen size quilt would probably take me an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm. So is that including, because I know you iron them beforehand?
Oh, that's without the ironing, yes. I do iron the quilts. The reason I like to iron the quilts is when I put them on the machine, I have to tension them. And sometimes when you're ironing, you might see a little seam that isn't caught. And if you put it on and the machine catches that part that isn't caught, it will rip the quilt.
And what sort of things should people keep in mind when they're having a quilt professionally quilted? I know that we've talked before about leaving excess of the batting and the backing.
Yes, it's different with your domestic machine if you're quilting, but a long arm machine, we need at least 4 inches all the way round.
Right.
Because I have to tension it just so it sits nicely. If you don't leave that 4 inches, if you have it exactly the same as the top, there's a couple of inches that you can't get the machine into.
Right.
Because the straps are there to tension it. So you need that 4 inches all the way around.
Excellent. Yes, I don't think a lot of people realise just what goes into long arm quilting, so having it quilted.
And it's really difficult. I always measure the top and the backing to make sure I've got enough, because it's really difficult if you get to the last row of the quilt and you run out of backing.
Yes.
Because then you've got to take it off and try and add some backing to get that last row in.
Right. And also with the backing, people should actually finish their backing, shouldn't they? Like sew, if they've had to cut it and sew it.
Yes.
Yes. I do mention that because we didn't do that with our first quilt. We just simply brought the backing over and we realised afterwards, we should have actually done a little bit more work there.
No, it's not a problem, but it's
Yes.
and it's easier for me because I can measure it and I know that we've got enough before we start.
Yeah.
That's the last pin in.
Okay, she's tensioning it.
So I'm just tucking the wadding in behind, under the between the quilt top and the. I'll just tuck it up under there. So the next thing is to tension your straps here. Now they have to be firm, but not too tight, because you don't want it to be like a trampoline, because then it bounces and the machine has trouble moving. It doesn't like it. So it just needs to be just firm. Okay, so now we've got our wadding on. So now we have to attach the wadding to the backing. I'll mark the spots on the machine where I want it to start and where I want it to finish. So now I have to sew. Now I press quilt. I'm pulling up the bobbin thread. If you don't pull up your bobbin thread, you get a bird's nest on the back. So it's just doing some locking stitches. So now we've got our line. Now we need to attach the top of the quilt to the wadding and the backing. And like I said, that line gives me a nice straight line to follow. Any little threads you've got on the top of your quilt, if the fabric frays a bit, I like to cut those off because they can get caught around the hopper foot, and again there's a possibility of the quilt tearing if it gets caught up in these.
It's amazing how much some of this fabric frays.
Yes, and I've found some people like to wash their their fabrics beforehand, and that makes it fray even more. And I usually trim the top of the quilt to get all that those fraying threads off the quilt, just to keep it.
Do you normally wash your fabrics before you quilt?
No, I don't. I do like the size in the fabrics. I think it gives. I don't have a problem washing quilts after I've quilted them, but I just like the. I like the size in the in the fabric. It just gives it a good body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, we don't wash ours either, but some people swear by it.
Yes. So now I've pinned the top on. So I use the machine manually without the computerisation now to attach that, the top to the wadding and the backing.
Do you use the machine for free motion quilting?
I do. I have done. It's not something I do it when I have to, and I've done it on a few quilts. But I do. I have fun with the computerisation, and I love looking at a quilt and selecting the pattern that matches that quilt. And especially for kids' quilts, I love doing, you know, dinosaurs and pirates and all the kids' things. Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, I do. I have done custom quilting when a customer has wanted it.
Right.
But it's very time consuming and yeah, it's not. I don't get as much fun out of it.
Right.
But now I have to take the pins out. Now baste down the sides of the quilt, and that's again if the hopper foot gets caught in under your quilt, that's where you could have a problem with the quilt tearing. So if we baste it down, you're not going to get that problem. You don't have to take that basting stitch out, because when you sew your border on, your binding on, the 1/4 inch of your binding will cover that basting. So you can just leave that in. Now we're ready to select a pattern and start quilting.
So how do you go about, what's your process you go through to select a pattern? You look at the material, decide what's going to match, or?
Yeah, I look at the fabric and decide what type of, so in this case this is a floral, and it's a very crisp, clean pattern, so I'm going to be using white thread, and I've got a pattern in there that's got daisies. So I try to match the pattern with the quilt. Sometimes if the fabric is a bit busy, if there's lots of, I tend to do a much simpler pattern, so you're not getting the fabric, the pattern on the fabric competing with the pattern of the quilting. We're going to select a pattern now for the quilt. The machine has lots of patterns loaded. I also buy patterns and I put them on my flash drive, and then I just put them onto the quilt. The one I've selected for this is daisies and loops. Now I have to resize that pattern to get the size that I want. I like doing the patterns about 10 inches on a quilt this size, so it just gives a very flowing, it's not too intense, and the quilt has still got a drapey feel. If you do too much intense quilting, the quilts get very stiff, but they're great for show quilts. But for quilts that people use on their lounges and on their beds, I like something a little bit more drapey. So now I've selected my pattern. I'm going to resize it. So now we've got to get the area of the quilt. So I mark the corners. So that's given me the width of the quilt. So that pink box on the screen is the area of the quilt. Now I have to get the pattern into the pink box. It doesn't quite reach the edges of the area of the quilt, so I have to skew it to make it fit. Now we're ready to quilt. I have to move the machine to line up with the start of the pattern, which is the little green dot, which is there. Pull up the bobbin thread again.
to show you some quilts that Chris has actually quilted, and you'll just see how amazing these are. So this first one here, it's actually just a piece of fabric, isn't it, Chris?
It's just 1.5 metres of fabric, fun kids fabric, and we've put homespun borders on it. I've quilted this with lime green dinosaurs. So it's got baby dinosaurs on it.
Oh, it just finishes it beautifully. And this one's got pirate ships, and again, this is a similar sort of thing,
Similar
isn't it?
sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's got pirate ships on it, and when I quilted it, I quilted ships and a skull and crossbones, and
They're just amazing.
yeah, it's
And just shows you how easy it is if you get just a lovely piece of fabric for a kid and then have it professionally quilted. I mean, that just looks amazing. Now this one here is my favourite. I love this quilt. I have a granddaughter who would be absolutely besotted with this. But all the shoes, it's lovely.
we put crystals on it. These are hot fix crystals,
They look great.
and we just really jazzed it up.
Yes,
If
it really
you
makes it pop.
this piece of fabric with the Eiffel Tower on it is just covered in crystals. The whole Eiffel Tower is just crystals.
Beautiful.
And then when I quilted it, I used a variegated thread, a black and white variegated thread, and quilted high heels.
This one here is a Japanese quilt.
Yes, it was
it
a panel
Yes.
that we cut, and we just used all the Japanese fabrics around it.
Oh, it looks great.
And the blue and white is just so stunning.
Yes, yes.
Quilted big flowers on it, just so it'd hold it together and just blend in.
Yes.
You didn't need anything too heavy because the fabrics are just beautiful.
Yes. Now this is one that Chris has just quilted for us, and you'll remember this from our rail fence tutorial, so you can go back and have a look at that. I'll put a link in the description below. But she's done this with an open leaf pattern, and it just sets it off beautifully. I really love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of flowers. It's a bit busy, so I just thought a plain leaf.
Yes.
All the florals have got a leaf in them, so I just did a leaf on a vine.
Oh, it's just beautiful.
In a mahogany type colour, and it just blends in beautifully.
Yes. So if you're not into quilting large quilts, I really do recommend that you go and have it professionally done. So I'd like to thank you for having us, Chris.
It's a
and
pleasure.
showing us your machine and your beautiful quilts. That's been awesome.
Oh,
So thank you very much for that.
Just good fun.
So if you've enjoyed this little chat with Chris, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and come back and see some more great tutorials.